said it was me that broke his jaw. The actual move, in terms of me flipping up on the middle rope and being propelled back into the ring by the top rope, is an old sort of move spot that a British wrestler by the name of Les Kellett used to do about 20 or 30 years ago. And Les Kellett was this he was really a comedic wrestler. He used to pull a lot of face shields and this highly entertaining comedic wrestler. But beyond that, apparently, from all I've heard, I've never met the guy, but from talking to people who were around him, he was like one of the toughest guys in the business at the time, real mean old bugger, and that was what he used to do. He'd be wrestling, someone would give him a shot, and he'd flip upside down in the middle rope, so he'd actually come out and headbutt the guy in the stomach, and the guy couldn't continue, and that would be the end of the match. Ha, 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 And obviously that gives you an idea of how the business was back then and how the business is right now, The stomach can't continue. I lariat someone in the face, and so there you go. That was them, and this is now, and I guess that would be my favourite. Because it looks the most devastating, and it's probably the safest as well. Some of the lariats I throw, you're kind of blind throwing them, and that can be dangerous for yourself and for the guy as well. And I'm certainly trying to get away from that sort of thing now, using them a lot less in the matches, because it's just, there's no point in hurting yourself or hurting anybody else, especially when a lot of the fans really don't appreciate it or give a fuck when you can't wrestle anymore anyway. So,
actually, leading on to that before the next question, do you find yourself now? We asked this question last week, and I like to ask the indie superstars this. Do you find that the fans in an indie setting like Ring of Honor and a smaller setting are more prone to hate you as a heel? Like you play a heel on television in the ring. You're not necessarily that person outside, though you may well could be. But do you find that sometimes people take that to heart and honestly hate you as a heel, as a person, when you're playing the heel?
No, I've never really found that, to be honest with you. And more so than anything, a lot of times when I'm in the ring and I see some of the sort of diatribes that people spew at me, I really do feel like they really do hate me, and to a certain extent, they're probably better actors than we are, because a lot of times after the show, I'll be walking out to the car and I'll see these same people who are telling me to, F you, Nigel, and I hope you die, and all these sort of things, and really screaming it. And then they'll come up to me afterwards and go, great show, can I have your autograph? That was really good, I enjoyed it. So sometimes you don't know whether they're being serious or whether they're not, I think, if they do hate you a lot of times in the independents, they hate you because they seem to think they know better than you what you should be doing. They're the sort of, what do you call them here? Is it armchair quarterbacks? Is that what they're called, right?
Yeah, armchair quarterbacks.
Yeah, people who've never done it themselves, but for some reason think that, they, have a better idea of what makes a good match, or who should be in the main event position, or who should be the champion, or blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying you have to be a professional wrestler to understand, what makes a good match. You don't have to be a chef to know what makes a good meal. But to a certain extent, if you haven't taken the bumps, if you haven't paid your dues to get in the ring, and you consider yourself a wrestling fan, you should at least have the respect for the people that have, I might go in a McDonald's and I might not like the fucking cheeseburger that someone gives me, but I'm not going to shout at the guy and tell him he's a prick and throw it back in his face, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But go back to McDonald's, fair enough, that's business, but don't be an arsehole about it, At the end of the day, people like that, we just don't need them. There's plenty of fans out there that do respect the wrestlers, that do give a shit, that, are willing to take it and understand the fucking sacrifices that we make to get in the ring, and I've got no time for the ones that don't.
Well, can't get any more well said than that. Well, we have about one question left apiece, and then let you have your final say. Let my partner ask his question.
All right. Nigel, you held the Ring of Honor title for over a year and a half. If you could have handpicked, when you had to drop the title, to give that title to anyone, who would it be, or were you happy with who you dropped the title to?
I've always had a lot of respect for Jerry. I actually had never had any problems with the fact that he's the Ring of Honor champion now. No problems at all, you know. I mean, one of the first matches I ever had in Ring of Honor was against Jerry Lynn. Ironically, it was a WrestleMania weekend as well. It was WrestleMania weekend 2000 and... Oh, bugger. Was it 4? Was it 4? It was WrestleMania 20 when it was in New York City. Was that?
Yes, that was 4.
Yeah, so it was 2004, and it was like my second or third match in Ring of Honor, something like that. So I still was pretty much a no name there, and I remember coming out to the ring. It was in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and God, you almost could have heard a pin drop as I walked to the ring. And I thought, Jesus Christ, these are the worst fans in the world. You know what I mean? They're gonna shit all over this. And then as soon as Jerry's music played, you know, the place came unglued. He comes out and everyone's going nuts for him, and I'm just like, oh, jeez. Now I get a sense of what it's like to be over and more importantly, not over, you know. And so that was 2004, and then fast forward to 2009, 5 years later, and all of a sudden, you know, people in a very different situation. I'm no longer a sort of opening guy trying to get, you know, a bit of a name for myself. I'm actually the champion at the end of a reign. You know, end of a long run, and you know, Jerry's obviously gone and done a few other things, and you know, he's now trying to cement his legacy in the business as well. So it's a very, very different situation. But you know, I always remember that the first match we had like that, and how cool he was, and how he helped me, you know, try and establish myself in Ring of Honor. And so I always look forward to wrestling him, and I always consider it an honor. You know, he was the guy that followed me, you know. He's paid his dues. He loves this business, you know, as much as anybody else. And, you know, the same thing goes with the fans, as I mentioned before, you know. Maybe you don't like him as a champion. Now, that's fair enough. That's your opinion, you know, and you're entitled to that opinion, certainly. But, you know, you have to respect what he's done in the business. You have to respect the passion and the sacrifices that he's made to the business. You know, now he doesn't go on the internet and tell you everything about it, but take it from me that, you know, I've been around him. You know, he's a guy that loves it, absolutely loves it. He started out in the AWA, you know, in the 80s, and he's never done anything else. It's just in his blood, you know, and he really believes in it. He really believes passionately about it, and say anything else that you want about him, and you know, and that's the truth. You can't ever take that away from him. But you know, as far as other people, you know, I wouldn't have a problem with anybody else being the chief after me. You know, to be honest with you, obviously, from a business standpoint, there'd be certain guys that, you know, probably wouldn't be good champions, and other guys that'd be better champions. You know, but yeah. That wasn't my decision. So.
All right. Yeah, it's funny you said how he doesn't, you know, come on the internet and say a lot. Actually, next week we have him on the show to wrap up our little interview spree here. He'll be on the show next Wednesday, actually. So
right.
It's interesting for you to hype him up like right into that, actually.
I'm glad I said good things about him, man.
All right.